Okay, this is going to be a blog about the family business. My father started 1949, and my brother and I got involved in 1974. My father actually was the first man in the United States of America to put spaghetti sauce in a glass jar. Before that, it was just Franco-American had spaghetti sauce in cans. The reason being that back then, if you had, like what now, people want to see everything that's in there. They want to see seeds, they want to see fiber, bulk, and all kinds of stuff. Back then, everything had to be homogenized. So if the slightest little thing was in the jar, like maybe a skin of a tomato, they would not buy the sauce, so they had it in cans. When my father came along in 1949, and it was interesting because he was selling shrimp in restaurants for shrimp cocktails. So he'd be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and when I was kind of all fogged out in the morning, another day having to go to that god-awful school to learn absolutely nothing of any importance, I would see my father in the kitchen, like shelling shrimp. And finally, his business got so big that he had to buy a refrigerated truck because he was really traveling around the city. And he had to get there before noon because people want shrimp cocktails around noon. Anyway, he wakes up one morning and he realizes that, if you vacuum seal a jar of anything, like you see in the supermarket where you got the indentation, and as soon as you open it up, it pops, you're breaking the seal. Once that thing is sealed, it'll last 2-3 years. I'm not sure if it's, it seems like it tastes as good. I'm not sure if the nutritional value is still there, but it definitely doesn't spoil. It can last for 3 years. Whereas the shrimp, of course, would spoil in one day. So he decides, just out of just pure luck, he said, I think I want to just go down in my father's basement. Father had a restaurant called Enrico's. So he walked down in the cellar with his sister, and he poured by hand spaghetti sauce in 12 little pints, cooled them down, put labels on them, just heat and serve, took them across the street to a mama and papa store. Back those days, 1949, there wasn't any chain stores. It was all people living above their store, walking down and having little mama and papa stores. And it sold out. He put it on consignment. And as he was walking, it was like funny, I was out on the curb playing with my brother. 1949, I was 6 years old. I saw him come out of the elevator that comes out of the sidewalk, and here he comes with an apron on with sauce all over it. And some of the older people in the restaurant came out and kind of mocking him, like, hey, like, you're going to think you're going to be able to sell spaghetti sauce because they're already selling Franco-American. They sell. Anyway, he goes over, puts it on consignment, he sells in about a couple hours. So he makes 2 cases, that sold out pretty quickly. So he asked his father for $800 to buy a kettle and a few other supplies and things, and his father turned him down because he was the 6th and youngest child, and he quit high school at the age of 14. And did a lot of, it was working like, in fact, when the Erie Canal was coming through from like Buffalo through Rochester, Syracuse, down to Albany, then down to New York, my father used to shine shoes. There's an old building in Syracuse now. Now it's called Erie Boulevard. They actually paved in the old canal. Erie Canal was looked upon as being one of the great inventions of the world. And you can just sort of see, like, this little Italian kid, like, shining shoes next to the Syracuse Savings Bank, an old Gothic structure built in before my father was born. My father was born in 1914. He worked from Fort. Anyway, he worked and he worked and he worked. So his father wouldn't give him the $800, told him he was a bum, blah, 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 the usual nonsense. And So he borrowed it from a friend, and long story short, in his heyday, he was selling all of New York, New York City, Boston, Philadelphia. He was like, just became this really, really wealthy man. And I remember him telling me about a year before he passed away that at the funeral, I mean, he didn't know he was going to pass away. He was just 91 at the time. So he says, don't ever at that funeral say that I had any kind of vision about spaghetti sauce, because the story I told you, just pure luck. So I laughed. I said, what do you are proudest of? And he said, during the Depression, when he was 1929, he was 15, ended like maybe when he was 23. He never missed a day of work. So I said to him, well, why did you work so hard? And he said, I wanted more than soup, because no welfare in those days. You didn't work, you went up to town, got a bowl of soup. That was it. And so anyway, he becomes very, very wealthy. Ragu, which most everybody watching this video has heard of, I'm sure. They saw how much money he was making, and around 1956, 57, they started, him and a father and 6 brothers, started Ragu in Rochester, New York, the Calisano brothers. And they overtook my father and ended up selling out to Chesborough Cold Cream down here in Nashville, Tennessee for about $26 million, and they made it international. And it was really funny. After I left for California in 1970, became like a kind of a hippie and stuff. I always laugh when my father goes, well, I was down, my brother and I were down in high school getting fed nonsense. Like Dylan said in that song, 20 years of schooling and they put you on the day shift. And Paul Simon said, the musician, for all the crap I learned in high school, it's a wonder I can even think at all. So I used to laugh with my father. I said, well, we're down there in high school. The Calisano brothers, 6 brothers, are helping their father get their business. We could have been down there helping you. At any rate, it didn't happen that way. And so, really a long story short, Campbell's Soup Company, owned out in Chicago, Illinois. They started Prego, probably the late 60s or so, to challenge Ragu. And when they did, they pretty much knocked out all of the smaller companies like ours was. However, by that time, 1973, I was in California at the time, and health food stores were kind of mostly bulk. There was and nothing really canned or bottled in the stores. It was all about not recycling, just don't use the jar. Don't buy the glass jar to begin with. Bring your jars in, fill things up. That was the thing. And I started seeing glass jar products starting to come in. I think I saw animal crackers and mustard, I believe. It's been a long time, 47, 48 years ago. And I didn't, by the time, like I said, I was at a Rainbow by that time, which you'll read about the Rainbows in other blogs. I was into raw food and making our own fresh sauce. I wasn't into bottled jar, especially throwing a bottle away. And so, but I wanted to get, the love of my father. I was really dysfunctional in that way. My father never really showed that much love, so naturally the child is always yearning for that love. And so I went back Christmas of 1973, told my father and what we could do as far as bringing glass jar sauce into the stores, and he said, go down, smoke another joint, or no, there's no such thing as organic spaghetti sauce. I was trying to, make an organic sauce. And so it was really funny. I used to take driver cars right after Christmas down to Florida, and I'd spend the rest of the 2 or 3 months there before I went back to California. And I go to the beach one day and I take a blank sheet of paper and with crayons, I drew like pictures of mountains and streams, all kind of nature stuff. And underneath I wrote in handwritten that what my father's strengths were, what he could do, because we had an amazing plant, all automated, completely powerful. And that we could make a sauce. I wrote it to Irwan, which was like the biggest name, and I wrote it for 3 or 4 other companies, Tree of Life, and a few other ones. I can't think of the names now. So, and that, get a hold of my father and he'll make a sauce for your label, because we private labeled a lot, and down through the years. So Irwan calls my father and tells him about the letter, this crazy letter. They got this crazy letter written in crayons and handwritten. They go, is this on the level? So my father goes, nah, that's just my son, crazy son. He probably go, what's this about? Being really irritated, and they're going, well, can you do what he said? And my father goes, yeah, I'm a manufacturer. I can manufacture. I said, well, he said you can make us a sauce. Father, yeah, I can make you a sauce. What do you want? He goes, well, we're nationwide. We deliver our product nationwide, so probably 300-400 cases to start to get it out there to the stores. And he goes, well, you'll need about X amount of dollars. I forget what it was. And they go, where do you send a check? So my father's like, whoa, who's my craziest? Maybe my son's not that crazy, even though he could never admit that. So Irwan spaghetti sauce hit the marketplace. Along the same time, when my father saw that sell the way it sold, and he came out with Enrico's All Natural Spaghetti Sauce, and that was the birth of Enrico's All Natural. I was a little disappointed because there wasn't enough organic tomatoes being grown in the country at the time, so they came out with an all natural one and didn't call it, which was really like a big joke, all natural. There was the same water, the city water. The tomatoes were sprayed with the same nonsense that the regular stores. The only difference was that it had sea salt instead of regular salt. It had better oil, cold pressed olive oil, and it had honey instead of sugar. And they called it all natural. They got $1 more a jar for it. Big scam. The all natural. Even organic now is being polluted to the nth degree, and I'll get into that later. So, like I said, I was pretty disappointed, and that's one of the reasons why my father didn't feel that I really did anything in his degrees, is because, they didn't come out with organic, they came out with all natural. And I said, well, how about the fact that last Christmas you told me to go smoke another doobie, that it wouldn't go at all? Does that count for anything? Of course not. My father double talked. My father had the ability to say one thing and then the second half of the sentence be hypocritical to what he said in the first part of the sentence. He never could ever understand that. He did understand it, he just didn't admit it that he understood it. So at any rate, boom, out comes all natural. And we made it for about 4 or 5 companies private labeled besides our own. The only one we didn't make through the 70s and 80s was a sauce there was a different Irwan in Los Angeles than there was in Boston. And they called it Johnson spaghetti sauce because supposedly there's a man named Colonel Johnson sailed to South America and brought back to the Northeast in New Hampshire, Connecticut somewhere, a tomato, which everybody thought he was going to drop dead, because even today tomatoes are not considered a fruit or a vegetable, sort of in between. And even the Irwan wouldn't call it Irwan spaghetti sauce because I think his name was Mancho Kushi, something like that. It was sort of like the nutritionist behind the Irwan at the time. Tomatoes were considered too yin. And so they were into macrobiotic, which is the balance, which is brown rice in the middle. So they called it Tom's spaghetti sauce, or Mark's, when I forgot. I think it was Mark. So the company in LA called it Johnson spaghetti sauce because of Colonel Johnson. They named it after him. So we were like, made a whole lot of money all through the 70s, all through the 80s, and then around the late 80s, all the big companies that told us we were full of baloney with nutrition and taking vitamins and minerals all started buying all of the companies, and the conglomerates moved into that business, the all natural business or the health food business. Like anything you see in the store now, very rarely you might see, like our friend Rob's got candy, not candy bars, but nutrition, chocolate bars and stuff. People locally got things in Whole Foods down here in the Earth Fair. But anything that's made, that comes from out of town is made by a big private label firm that makes the products for the small person that's got maybe have a following. You just can't compete anymore. Like Seeds of Change came out with a sauce. They're backed by Coca-Cola people. It's just bizarre. But it was really funny though. Like when I went, my brother says to me in 1980 when he quit. My brother, I was going to just do public relations, which I did from where I was in California. But my brother went back to actually help run the company, and the all natural division. And so, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I forgot. Oh yeah, 1980 when he came back, he quit, and then when he met his future wife, and she talked him into going back again to really like. And we told him, if my father had listened to my brother, we would have we sold off for $100 million to a conglomerate, or we'd have been just big, powerful company running the company. My father did not want my brother to get larger than he was in his own company. That was like his little blanket, a security blanket. And so we told my brother that in 1980, I said, and his good friend Joe, that he's never going to get that company. And my brother looked at us and laughed. He goes, I'll retire him in 4 or 5 years. I said, you don't understand, Marty. This man went through the Depression, and it's his, glory, his fame, that he started a company and got that big and stuff. My brother didn't listen. He went back, and so he says to me, you're trying to be an artist, you're trying to sell songs, you haven't done anything yet, come on back with me. And well, actually it was prior to that in the 70s when I used to go back just home. I'd walk down to the plant. My father and I would argue because, he wasn't paying me what I thought he should pay me for the fact that I got this whole thing started for him. So meanwhile, he's trying to get me to go in the back room where I used to actually help him out when I worked for my father from after college in '65 until I left for California in 1970, off and on. And one of the things I did was go in the back room and run the entire plant in the factory, which was like one of the lowest points of my life, obviously. Spaghetti sauce plant, you got hundreds and hundreds of glass jars banging each other trying to get to a small conveyor belt to go down to get filled. Capper machine going, and the heat, it was like 95 out, and it's like we're cooking sauce at 200 degrees, so you can imagine how terrible it was. So when I went back from California, I'm in the office, and I'm trying to get him to use, instead of using regular jars like they do in the stores to throw away, I was trying to get him to spend a little extra money and have canning jars that when people got done using our sauce, they'd be able to use it for a canning jar. And I'm up on the roof trying to measure for solar panels because I wanted to get off the grid making the sauce, all these green energy things. And I tried to talk him into going to buy like maybe 400 acres up in upstate New York and grow all the tomatoes I wanted to make in one side of the plant. I wanted to make a can up tomatoes and have Enrico's canned tomatoes that we grew locally. And besides the regular sauce business, I wanted to have a side thing where I did the or cooked tomatoes from local stuff, and also do a vineyard, make some wine and have a Montessori school and all of that in the early 70s. And he threw it all down, which, a lot of people did back then. I'm not the only son that couldn't get through to their father. So it was like, that's about it, except for my father was like, I gotta add this as far as when he was passing away at 92 years old, a couple of weeks before he passed away. He was sitting there and I was singing songs to him, and hardly ever gave me any credit for, being a singer when he was alive, but he's sort of lying there in a comatose state, sitting on the couch, and I'm singing songs. I no longer get one song, you max me, do another song, I did about. So all of a sudden I get done singing. I said, hey, how'd you like to, let me throw you in the wheelchair and I'll take you up the road here for a little ways. And so I grab him put his arm around my thing and I lift him up and his face is this close to me, And he says something in Italian and he never spoke Italian his entire life. So I said, so what does that mean, Pop? And he goes, it's all bullshit. And so I start laughing, and I go, what do you mean it's all bullshit? He goes, well, and he looks me straight in the eye and he goes, I'm in here. And look what I'm in. Look at this vehicle I'm in. So I really start laughing. It's funny. And I look up at him thinking, apologetically, I'm laughing at my father before he passes away. And he looked at me, his eyes sparkled, like a little kid, so happy that I laughed at something he said. It was amazing. Wasn't even my father at that point. He was an amazing man. When he was 12 years old, that's going to be another blog. See if I got everything. Yeah, love and peace.